show for you that I'm excited to roll out with. And, stuff.
And stuff!
Ooh, we are live on the YouTube, folks, so we're going to officially get this kicked off in 3, 2... What is up, everybody? Welcome to Comic Book Club. I'm Alex.
I'm Justin.
Pete's frozen. We lost Pete already.
He's frozen in a very good pose. That's fun. It's on Mardi Gras, Pete's going to freeze up because it's actually his technology and Wi-Fi is fine. He, as a human, is frozen.
Yeah. Well, what happened was right before we went live, we looked at Pete. We were like, "Hey, Pete, show us your."
Yeah.
And then just froze like that for a while. Pete, you're back. How are you doing?
Great. I just, drink a lot of frozen daiquiris.
That's not what we were talking about. So today is the kickoff of Mardi Gras. We've been talking about this in our Patreon Slack all day. Very exciting time. Yeah. I think we all have Mardi Gras themed drinks. Usually we wait to talk about what we're drinking until later in the show, but should we kick it off with that?
Let's do it.
Yeah, Pete. So what are you actually drinking?
Well, I'm drinking a Mountain Dew.
Mountain Dew.
Great. Very New Orleans. I picked up something in the Patreon Slack. This is a recommendation of our resident chef, Brett Macris. I made a modified veau carré.
Wow, look at both of you guys. French drinks, really leaning into it.
Yeah.
I'm drinking a Boulevardier, or if where I come from, a Boulevardier, because it's sounds like the snowmobile.
There we go.
Bombardier.
Yes, we are all, in fact, very fancy. We're all prepped for the Mardi Gras. And we have a packed show, so I kind of want to get into it. We have amazing guests for you. Later on in the show, we're going to have Natalie Zina Walschots and also Darick Robertson are going to be here. But first, I'm going to invite our first guest. He's a returning guest. He has a new project from Aftershock Comics that is out now. In fact, the second issue, I think, just came out this past week, called Scout's Honor. Ladies and gentlemen, David Pepose. Hello, how are you?
Hey.
Great, fellas. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited to catch up.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. Excited to chat with you. What are you drinking for Mardi Gras? What's going on?
Oh, boy. Well, I've got some old Mr. Pibb that I just got from Chipotle.
Nice. Old Pibb. Nothing better. Intoxicating.
It's still early where I am. I'm in Los Angeles, so it's only 4:00 my time. So I'm drinking decaffeinate. But please drink extra on my behalf, because yes, Lord knows we all need it in this day and age.
The great baton handoff of the day between caffeination and alcohol is it's a beautiful, healthy experience for all.
Yeah.
Now, another couple of people I can think of that probably need a drink are the characters in the new book, Scout's Honor from Aftershock Comics.
Oh, look at him.
Perfect segue.
Thank you very much. This book is a lot of fun. You teased it, I think, the last time you were on, but it's basically post-apocalypse with Boy Scouts, kind of. But is that where the pitch started, or where did it come from?
So for those who haven't read Scout's Honor yet, the quick pitch for the book is: years after a nuclear war, a cult has risen from the ashes, and their Bible is an old Boy Scout manual. So our series jumps about 200 years into the future with our main character, Kit, who's kind of the best and the brightest that the Ranger Scouts of America has to offer as they try to tame the irradiated Colorado Badlands. There's just one problem. This is a hyper-masculine survivalist cult that only allows men to serve. And so Kit has had to conceal her identity as a woman in order to pursue her calling as a Ranger Scout. Wow. Unfortunately, Kit's going to make a pretty chilling discovery that cuts all the way back to the heart of the Ranger Scouts creation. And she's going to find herself losing her religion as she embarks on a dangerous quest for the truth.
Wow.
Once again, like the last time we had you on, you are prepped with that pitch, and I like it a lot.
I say it every night in the mirror before I go to bed.
Shows.
Now, were you a Boy Scout?
My younger brothers were. Okay. And I think that was kind of the kernel of how Scout's Honor came to be, was being the outsider looking in. When you are a Boy Scout, it's all about the camaraderie and learning practical skills and hanging out with your boys. But the outside looking in, you see the costumes and you see the pageantry and you see the tradition of the motto and the bylaws. And you don't have to squint too hard for it to turn into a cult. And that was kind of what I was looking at with this pitch. Was when I first came up with it, I said, what's the weirdest thing a cult could use as a Bible? And when I thought of the Boy Scout manual, just a lot of things started clicking. It feels timely and perhaps uncomfortably so. I pitched this book in the fall of 2019. But just based on the way that like the development process went, and by the time I finally got my paperwork, my contract, it was about 2 weeks before lockdown. And so I wrote about 80% of this book during COVID. And it was, but when you think about it, you think like the rise of sort of the evangelical mega churches, the fetishizing of the military and survival prepping, kind of the general culture of toxic masculinity that we all find ourselves in. You put that in a cauldron and you irradiate it for 200 years, and the Ranger Scouts of America suddenly don't seem that far-fetched.
Well, and the genders, the Scouts being girls or boys, is also in the news because the Boy Scouts are now the Scouts. They've allowed girls into the group, and the Girl Scouts are mad. And so there's this weird push-pull happening where what's going to happen?
It's funny because that was actually me solving one problem with another. I've likened this book as Mad Max Fury Road meets Mulan, but there's little bits of The Handmaid's Tale, The Hunger Games, even Planet of the Apes thrown in for good measure.
Wow.
But I was thinking when I came up with the idea, I had sent Aftershock a number of different concepts, and actually Scout's Honor was kind of the one I had just come up with. I threw it in the bottom of the list just to round it out. They're like, that's the one.
That's the one they go for.
That's always the way.
The least, the one you have no ideas for besides.
My first thought was, oh man, like this idea, an all dudes book doesn't really fly in 2019 when I was coming up with it. And I was like, oh no, lean into that. Like that is a weird thing. And so having this story be about this girl who she desperately wants to be a Ranger Scout, and yet her culture is telling her she can't be. And it becomes sort of a story about secrets and how oppressive and stifling we can be. Kit is a character who, even though she's kind of the best Ranger Scout there is, she's always got her guard up. She's always got kind of this armor on where she can't let her guard down because somebody might find out that she's committing kind of this ultimate blasphemy. And we'll see, it's not really a spoiler at this point since issue 2 is out. The same thing with her best friend, Des, who he's the son of the Scoutmaster, who's kind of the political and religious leader of this cult.
Oh, boy.
But we find out that Des is gay. And that was a big part of this story, was figuring out, when you strip away the post-apocalyptic elements and the Boy Scout elements, it really is the story of kind of a small, isolated, conservative town. And for certain people who fit this really rigid mold of masculinity, the world's your oyster. But what happens when you don't? How do you kind of navigate that world? And how do you kind of figure out how to live and accept yourself authentically and live an authentic life? And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of struggle with. I think it's an ongoing, lifelong concern for a lot of people. And I can certainly say a lot of this book was autobiographical in a way.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in a cult, and I obviously didn't.
You grew up 200 years in the future.
But I grew up in a particularly conservative upbringing. I grew up in Missouri, a particularly political and religious conservative house, a conservative Jewish house. And it wasn't until I left home that I really kind of had that political and spiritual reawakening. But I remember just how disorienting it was. I remember kind of feeling like, oh, all these things that I had been raised to believe, sort of the small government, stay out of your bedroom conservatives, that doesn't really exist anymore. And kind of realizing like, oh no, my political views were actually much more left than I thought. I was a Democrat and didn't know it. But it's really disorienting to recalibrate your own internal moral and ethical and spiritual compass. But that's part of the coming of age. I think that's something we all experience. And I think that is kind of the emotional core and the emotional spine of this book. But we also have post-apocalyptic Boy Scout cults. So
right. And there's a lot of fighting.
Yeah, exactly.
Alex bringing it back to masculine shit because he can't handle this real conversation.
Okay, you can't handle
beer. That's the beer talk. And that's why you move out to where you live now, LA, so you can really let those.
I do it. I did it to be as masculine as possible.
Yeah. In LA, you could be that masculine. Ideal.
yeah, it's been a fun book. I'm working with a really talented team on this. Artist Luca Casalanguida, you might know him from his work on Lost Soldiers over at Image, or James Bond over at Dynamite. And he's got this, sort of Italian style, kind of in the vein of like a Joe Kubert. And with a little bit of like Jock thrown in the mix.
Yeah, the art's great.
He's not only able to nail these really fun action moments, which everybody wants to see in the book, but this is also a book that's got these kind of thoughtful pauses where characters like Kit or Des are sort of thinking like, oh man, did I see what I think I just saw? Like, that must be me playing a trick of the mind. And Luca really kind of nails those poignant, quiet moments. And so I always say I save the tearjerker moments for like the last 2 issues, but he's really been kind of wringing out the emotion with every single scene. And it's just been, I've been really fortunate to be able to work with him. And colors Matt Milla from Daredevil. I remember when our editor, Christina Harrington, said, "Hey, what do you think about Matt as the colorist?" And I remember saying, "Are we allowed to do that?" Like, he's just a real artist. He's able to kind of balance nicely that kind of dusty post-apocalyptic feel with this sort of these hot neon teals and magentas, kind of just showing how alien this irradiated world still is.
Yeah.
And then Carlos Manguel, our letterer, kind of rounding out the team. Just a really nice sense of texture that he's throwing, even just in the dialogue. It really reminds you that this is like a harsher world. And even seeing just in your standard word balloons, the little flourishes of style that Carlos throws into the mix, it really, I feel fortunate. I'm kind of the least experienced of the team. And so it's incredible to have such an amazing team at my back. They really have elevated my scripts far beyond anything I could have imagined. And so I'm really grateful to be part of it.
I have a hardball question for you. I never made it across the Weeblos Bridge. Maybe that's what it was. But I was a Cub Scout. So most of my scouting was focused on the Pinewood Derby. Will my Pinewood Derby experience be reflected in this book at any point? Because it's about weighting the front of the car. You got to have a heavy front, light back.
So we have, and nobody has actually noticed it yet, but I'm going to put it out there, is that we had kind of our little riff on the Pinewood Derby that they call them sand vultures, and they're kind of like the sort of the badass reclaimed motorcycles of the Ranger Scouts. And I'm so glad you brought it up because like nobody's mentioned it in any of the reviews. It's just, I'm a sucker for a good car chase, and so we do have little elements of that scattered throughout the book. Yes, I do remember helping my brothers build their Pinewood Derby cars, and so that was definitely something I wanted to make sure we had a little wink and nod to. But we got all sorts of fun stuff in it. We've got the merit badges. We actually wrote back matter in the first issue explaining the religious elements of all these different Ranger Scout merit badges. The explosives merit badge reflecting their creation myth, for example, where they're kind of like the world started an explosion, and now they're obsessed with kind of figuring out how bombs work, because if you don't respect the bomb, you might be consumed next.
Whoa, that's a terrifying badge.
Yeah,
sure. Are you going to actually produce these badges? I mean, I know they're in the back of the book. You could cut out the book if you want. I love cutting up comics personally, but
come on, man, respect the art.
This has been a really fun, actually, promotion that Aftershock has been doing. I think for the first issue, if you ordered 20 copies or more, you would get copies of, I think it was the Wildlife Survival Merit Badge. And then if you got copies of our incentive cover, you get the Recon Merit Badge. I believe issue two on is if you order more than 10 copies, you can get a different merit badge with each issue. So I believe it's Wildlife Mastery is the issue 2 badge. And you can see our our suicide hornets, which are kind of a big monster that we will be seeing in issue 3. It's just, so much of this book is about, to quote my high school history teacher, Howard Zinn was talking about how history is written by the victors. And I would claim that history is written by the survivors. It's sort of a game of telephone that kind of mythologizes and builds on itself. But what happens if you cut that game of telephone? Human beings, they want that continuity. We grasp to the past to kind of figure out how to orient ourselves to the future. And I thought, what would happen if we're in a new dark ages? What kind of scraps of the old world would we grab onto? What direction would we take from there? And then get to watch how these little bits of iconography get to mutate over the course of 200 years. And that's been really kind of the fun world building of Scouts Honor. Saying, an old Boy Scout pocket knife has metamorphosized into what they call switchblades, and they're giant, like Final Fantasy Buster swords that have little sub blades hidden inside the main blade, because they're like, oh, well, that's just how the original Ranger Scouts did it. And it's very much a conversation that you hear today in the news when you hear people talking about, oh, well, the founding fathers intended, blah, blah, blah. They probably were not imagining, iPhones and streaming video and COVID.
Except George Washington.
I think George Washington was hit me up on Twitter at
exactly. Check out
Cherry Cheese Choppa.
Yeah, exactly. Choppa.
Before we let you go, David, so first and second issue just came out. Is this a limited series? Is it ongoing? What's the plan at this point?
This will be a 5-issue miniseries. I'm a big believer in don't overstay your welcome in a book. Issue 3, you can ask your local comic shop to add Scouts Honor to your pull list. Issue 4 is available for pre-order now. The code is Feb for February 210990. You can, and I believe issue 5 will be up for in previews probably in the next couple of weeks. Just ask your local comic shop to add Scouts Honor to your pull list. It's a huge help. Beyond that, tell them to order heavy so you can get yourself some Ranger Scout merit badges. They are super, super, super limited edition. It's a fun book, and one that I think it's got some heart for it being a post-apocalyptic book. And
it's good.
Awesome.
I think I have the right takeaway here. I'm going to start and then really push a Boy Scout-based cult for the next 200 years. I think the takeaway is correct here, right? Yeah. And my Swiss Army knife has the fork, and I eat with it and then put it back, which is a very classic.
As long as it's giant, as long as you make it a giant spork, then you're great. The cult of spork.
Excellent. David, thank you so much for coming on. Always a pleasure chatting with you. Congrats on the book. It's a lot of fun.
Great seeing you again.
Have a great night, guys.
See you, David. Later.
All right. Once again, David Pepose.
He's got his shit together. He's dropping the order code for the comic book.
Wow.
That is legit.
Yeah. On the other hand, Pete cannot sit in the center of his camera. I thought this was the way that it was chopped off when it was this ratio, but no, even when we're the widescreen ratio, you're still like,
he's shy. Pete's so shy, little guy. He's got the Mountain Dew shyness that's creeping into his face right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to, again, we have a lot of guests this show, so we're going to keep on going here. Darick Robertson will be up after our next guest, but first we're going to invite Natalie Zina Walschots into the stream. Her book is called Hench. It's a lot of fun. You definitely should read it. Ladies and gentlemen, Natalie Zina Walschots. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm great.
Hello.
Good. How badly did I mangle your name?
No, you nailed it.
Oh, I nailed it?
Walschots, yeah.
Oh, my
As
gosh.
in to shoot a wall. You did great.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. So the book is called Hench. It came out in September. I have to admit, I was kind of late. I don't think I read it until probably January or something like that.
That's not late. You're fine. You're definitely
I'm okay.
within the acceptable window. Oh, yeah.
There's a cutoff period. After 6 months, you're like, nope, can't read a book anymore. I read it as a superhero fan and was totally enamored with the characters, really enjoyed the plot line. It developed in really fascinating, surprising ways that I wasn't expecting, particularly from the beginning. But for those who haven't read the book, what was the genesis of it? What is the germ of it? How do you pitch it out? And no pressure, but David was very good at pitching.
Oh, he was. This is frankly unfair, and I would like to complain to the authorities. So Hench follows the narrative of a young henchwoman, one of the frequently downtrodden and certainly not very respected or appreciated employees of supervillains. She's just a temp at the beginning of the novel, trying to find a job that, might last more than a couple of weeks and possibly has accidental in the process. Her very first run-in with an actual superhero ends up being devastating for her, both career-wise and physically. And recovering from a very serious injury, she does some math like you do, and realizes that superheroes are actually quite bad especially for the communities that they're ostensibly there to protect. And sort of that starts her on her own and much deeper and weirder villainous career.
One of the things that I really liked about it, again, as a superhero fan, I think that was the main reason I started to pick it up. But as somebody who freelanced for a really long time, I was I feel this. I feel what's going on here. Was that...
I too freelanced for an extremely long time. And it comes from a real place.
Yeah.
I joke that it's like obviously not an autobiography, but it's not an autobiography. And I certainly put a lot of that, angst and frustration and feeling super stuck in my life, in my career. I finished an MA in like 2008. So at the exact moment that, the economy where I was just kind of imploded on itself. And that was a really tough time to try and build a creative career. So yeah, I definitely poured a lot of those unfortunate experiences into Anna's early henching life for sure.
Yeah. One of the other things that I think is probably neat for comic book fans, and this is something I think that, typically is a derogatory way of saying it. It's not what I mean at all, but very typically with these sort of things, you have analogs to other heroes. And you kind of have it in here. There's sort of a Superman figure, sort of a Wonder Woman figure, but they really spin off from there. How difficult, knowing these very established characters, was it to go and try to create iconic superheroes, iconic supervillains that didn't necessarily riff off of the ones that we knew?
That's a great question. And I don't have a very good answer for it other than I didn't create them in opposition to a character. So, Super Collider certainly has very light shades of Superman, kind of in the sense that he's head and shoulders above most of his contemporaries in terms of respect and power level and that kind of thing, just kind of in a separate, not human almost class. But that was it. If anything, maybe a little bit more Red Sun Superman than traditional Superman. But I definitely didn't build him to be, the shadow Superman. He was more what is the embodiment of toxic masculinity? How can I pour all of my anger into a human shaped thing? And that's really where it came from. I've said this before, but I really think a lot of comics have a ton in common with the Fairy Queen, like the medieval epic poem, in that characters tend to be allegories for ideas or concepts. So, the way that superheroes tend to be allegories for truth or justice much more than they are human beings with ordinary flaws and rough edges and, obsessions and all that kind of stuff. So when I was creating the heroes, I tried to keep that in mind, to make them kind of walking, speaking ideas. Same with the villains, the big ones, that sort of have that idea-ness of them becomes kind of more important than their humanity. So yeah, I definitely created them not I never thought I need to make sure that quantum entanglement is not too Wonder Woman-y. That was just kind of not on my radar. But what was on my radar was, how can I create a character who embodies the ideas that I really want present in what that character represents.
Yeah.
I have one quick question. When will you release the ghost that you have trapped in the lantern behind you?
This is just a bundle of LEDs from AliExpress shoved into, into an IKEA lantern. Yeah, that's it.
It changed color when you started talking about it.
That's my partner, who is extremely dramatic, who thinks it's very cool to change the lights behind me.
I love it.
I got scared because I thought your pillow was moving, and then I realized it's a cat.
No, it's a cat. Yeah, these were originally supposed to be for decor, but now they're just nap trays. So,
yeah.
And not to toot our own horn, you can tell we're good interviewers because we're not concentrating on you. We're looking at your cat and your lantern.
Yeah, hey.
No, I mean we got to take.
I understand. There's a lot going on here. I understand.
Also, those cats look positively. They look like full human-sized cats. But it's exciting where you live.
Inky here is kind of the size of a man. Like when he walks down the stairs, it definitely sounds like a human person is like moving around my apartment. So you're not wrong.
You touched on this a little earlier, but one of my favorite parts of the book, and it definitely spirals out from here, but like you were talking about, the main character, Anna, starts kind of breaking down the actual cost of what these superhero battles would do. She starts setting up a blog that eventually leads to more of a career where she's running social media and running the numbers. How much of that for you as a writer then was trying to figure out those numbers and whether they worked?
Oh, they're real.
Yeah,
that's a great question. No, they're 100% real. The math that Anna uses is based on real world equations. I have the spreadsheets. I can show you them. They are amazing. So Ilan Noy, the researcher who's quoted in the book, is a real person who super generously let me use his very important research that usually organizations like WHO are taking advantage of. But he let me quote him, and the disability adjusted life years that she uses are a real world measure of the impact of natural disasters that form a actually shockingly good way of measuring the impact that superheroes would have on those communities. The incidents that are in the book are both inspired by comic scenarios and also real world disasters and kind of the analog cities that kind of exist in the book's universe to ours. I read a lot of year one comics and took note of every single injury, death, and incident of property damage, and then ran it through the equations. It depends on Metropolis is New York, so if it happened in Metropolis, I used New York numbers to make that work, and so on. And I ran those calculations, and they're real.
That's amazing.
Batman costs over 400 life years a year.
Wow.
Is he the deadliest of the ones that you?
He's real bad. He's real bad.
By
the way, I would just like to disabuse everyone of the notion that Batman doesn't kill people. He does. He just it is statistically impossible, even if he in the moment does not murder a person, that somebody he dropped down a stairwell is gonna land bad and you're dead. Human bodies are incredibly squishy and fragile. Or are going, that person suffers a complex spinal injury, gets a bed sore 3 years from now, and dies. And legally, that's murder. So it is absolutely straight up impossible with the body count that Batman has that he hasn't killed a lot of people. And it was very important to me, both in the research phase and in the book, that the injuries and the medical stuff and the kind of physical abject as it is present was as realistic as possible and as horrifying as possible, because I think we kind of gloss over how a superhero will be riddled with bullets, and then 2 issues later they have a bandage around their midsection and a brace on, and then they're
very
fine.
tough.
No, you're not. You're not. It's that's not how, or at least not how squishy, superpowered people are.
Right.
Now, can you?
Go ahead, Justin.
I was going to say, what can you give some advice to all the hench people out there on how to get by? Because I feel like you're the expert, and I think Alex has made the point that we're all sort of hench people in a fucked up way.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So how do we get
put
by?
it on a business card.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Get paid up front if you can. If your client won't pay you up front, get half up front if you can. And if you absolutely cannot do that, put late fees in your contract. And make a note of it on every invoice that you send.
That is legit good advice.
It's like dead serious. Like, the number one problem I have had as a freelancer in my life is getting people to pay me on time as they are supposed to. It is shocking. Yeah. So yeah, charge late fees. Awful. Like, unabashedly charge late fees and remind them of it in every single email. And yeah, if you can get paid up front, even in part, do it.
This job is an N plus 90 job, so we don't get paid for 3 more months. Like, the job is right now. What are you talking about?
Yeah, like, absolutely. Like, no, we have the like. I've had places like tell me up front there's a 6 month or more lead. I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm going to do this work right now, and then, like, I guess in the summer I'll be able to pay off my credit card. That's cool and reasonable.
Plus, it means you're always bothering. You always have to be worrying about that, and like, when do I bother these people? It means you're working for that entire 6 month period.
It is a very fine line between, like, how annoying can I be, where we're just on the right side of goodwill, like unless it's, time to go thermonuclear and they're dead to me, and then we're going at it. But, like, if I ever want to work for this person again, how can I be like very fuck you pay me while also being like, have a great day, good to see you.
We're also close to becoming the supervillains that we need to be.
So very close.
We got a question here on YouTube from Ramsey Hassan. Says, will you do a comic adaptation or sequel spin-off as a comic of Hench?
I would 100% love to. Like, absolutely. Yeah. There's nothing certain in the world in terms of a sequel. I would love for that to happen. That sounds like rad as heck. I love writing these characters. I love spending time in this universe. I'm super open to the idea of a comic adaptation, whether that's like in universe, like a direct adaptation of this storyline, or in universe spin-off stuff. I'm super into the idea, but there are no immediate sure plans, but wow, would that be cool?
Yeah.
Go buy the book, people. Let's make it happen.
I have one last question for you before we let you go. This is actually from my wife, who also read and really enjoyed the book. The main character's name is Anna Tromedlov, which is Voldemort backwards.
Sure is.
Was there any plan to have somebody reveal that at some point in the book, or is that just a funny Easter egg?
Not at all. That was me, like, making a joke to myself very early on in the draft of, and it stuck around. And the less comfortable I got with J.K. Rowling as a human and creator that I would ever want to be associated with in any way, like the slightly more conflicted I felt about that. But kind of in a, Tom Marvolo riddle, I am Lord Voldemort inversion. It was hard to take it out, while also kind of acknowledging the, like, general veneer of shittiness.
That is an amazing turn of phrase.
We put that on the book. Put that on the
cover. One last question, actually, for you for the.
Well, you can't say one last and ask.
I know. Eduardo posted it while I was saying that, while she was answering. Says, was there any pushback from publishers for pursuing this as a prose novel as opposed to a comic?
No, not at all. I have an amazing agent. He's a wizard, and he matched me with David Pomerico, my editor, who, like, grokked what I was trying to do immediately and was absolute hero about the whole thing and championed the book. Like, people have been championing this book from the beginning, and I am super lucky in that I got to work with people who, like, legit loved it and got what I was trying to do and wanted it to exist in the world in the version that I saw it as. Also, great thing about writing novels, you can just make it up. Right. Like I write for video games too. So it's not like what can the engine do? Like what can the character models do? Like what do we have room in a comic? Like someone has to draw this. Is that within like this artist's skill set or this realm of possibility or whatever? Same thing with film and TV. I can just make up anything I want.
Awesome.
It's great.
We have one last question for you for a stand-up guy. What are your cats' names, forwards or backwards?
They only go one way, but the eldest is Lydia. She's 17 and asleep over here. Then there's Inky, Blinky, and Clyde. Inky and Clyde are brothers. Blinky came first. She's very lovable, but very, very stupid. And we have a new kitten whose name is Gojira, but mostly we just make beeping noises at her.
Yes, as you must. That cat is living strong. 17 years old.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's also like the cat that will end you.
I love that. That's amazing. Natalie, thank you so much for coming on the show. Congratulations on the book. As we said, for everybody out there, no expiration date. You can go pick it up right now. It's
books keep going. Yeah.
Fingers crossed we get a sequel.
They're not like avocados.
I hope not. Thank you guys so much. This has been a blast.
All right.
Thank you.
Night.
Bye.
All right. Once again, Natalie Zina Walschots. The book is called Hench. It's out right now. It's super fun. And I'll tell you what, we're going to invite our last guest of the evening into this pack show here. You know him from his work on The Boys and many other things, but currently he's working on a bunch of other stuff, including Space Bastards. Ladies and gentlemen, Darick Robertson, hello.
Hey. Hi, guys.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Oh my gosh. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
I feel like I'm going to be a real disappointment after your last two guests, though. They were
no way.
And know their shit. And they're on top of it.
No, you already have an inherent drama.
A problem on your show?
No. Go.
Please, no, swear. I love it.
I should have asked that before I started swearing, but
no, that's good. You got a great setup there. You got a backdrop. Yes. You're good to go.
You're like a noir version of this show, and I love it. Yeah, there's a murderer who's going to happen in your cube.
It's like the worst, most simple arrangement that just hides my filthy studio from the world. I just put a sheet on the ceiling. That's all.
I do love, not to make you feel self-conscious, the way you're dressed with the hat and the way you're facing. It does feel
I saw
like
my COVID hair earlier.
Oh,
and you were like, I need a hat.
Yeah,
it just that I'm starting to see just how awful the pandemic's been to me. So.
It just feels like you're going to break out in a piano solo at any point.
I can play piano.
That would be amazing. We would love that.
Not well, but I can play.
So let's talk about Space Bastards. As usual with this show, we brought yet another totally successful Kickstarter on here. This one you have running right now. It's for volume 2 of the hardcover, and it's doing great. You have I think a little over 2 days left as we're taping this.
Yeah, but please go and pledge, because these guys have put Eric and Joe, the writers, before I came on board, had already put so much of their heart and soul into this project that when they got their funding from the first Kickstarter in order to hire me, and then brought me on as a co-creator, because I originally came on just to do covers for them, but they were so happy with the cover art. They're like, what will it take to bring you on full time? And I'm like, well, here's my rate. And, and they were like, we can do that. And I'm like, well, okay, sounds like fun. They offered me, to co-create. And so I was able to go in and kind of build the thing up visually from the ground up again. And that was from what they originally envisioned. And, it ended up being a lot of fun. It was you should have them on sometime, because they're really funny guys.
Would love to. Yeah.
So it's interesting. I mean, you talked about this a little bit, but in terms of the collaboration for something like this, they have a whole video on the Kickstarter where it's you and puppet form, and they tried to convince you of it. You've clearly done I know I'm going to guess that wasn't a documentary, but you've clearly done.
That was a surprise. I didn't know they were making a Muppet out of me, and
I mean, congrats.
I had the song from the Muppets in my head the whole time watching it. Am I a man?
Yeah, or a Muppet. Yeah.
Well, when you've done as many projects as you've done, I mean, I know everybody, like we were just talking about with Natalie just before, everybody's always looking for work as a freelancer, but you've done Transmet, you've done The Boys, you've done all these series, so I'm sure you're in demand. So when somebody approaches you for a project like this, what sells you on it? What are the ingredients you're looking for that brings you onto a book?
Well, I mean, the irony in that question is that I had no idea if the boys or Transmetropolitan were going to be successful when we started, and in the days we were doing Transmetropolitan, we struggled. 6 issues into the boys, even though it was doing well, they canceled us at DC. So, like my radar for these kind of things really comes back down to, do I like the people I'm working with, and does it sound like fun? Because I didn't get into comics to make money. Anybody that works in comics will tell you that's there was a brief period in the 90s you could do it, and about 7 guys did, and then everybody else.
I think I know who you're talking about. Actually, I think I know.
But you could. We just all watched that ship sail into the distance, never to return. I remember Eric Larson telling me straight up at a convention in the highlight of all of that, and he went, "Yeah," and this is before they went to Image. But Eric Larson was the one who said to me, he said, "Yeah, save your money. This isn't going to last."
Right. To be that aware of it at that point,
he knew it. He knew. He said, "This is never going to last." And I was like, I had just arrived, so I was like, kind of like defiant. I was like young and stupid, and I was like, "Yes, it will. People are finally discovering comics."
Yeah. But let me ask you though. Talking about picking the stuff you want to work on. It feels like a lot of the stuff you work on has sort of like a point, satirical. Really, it has a punch to it when it comes to the commentary. Is that something you factor into it when you're looking at what you want to work on?
Yeah, I mean, it just if it appeals to my sensibilities, I guess. In the case of Space Bastards, they had that world so clearly in mind. They really put a lot of thought and time into those characters that all I really wanted to do was come in and bring them to life. That's not my artwork.
I get into it.
Well, we're getting there. We're getting there.
But in this case, also the characters, it was an opportunity for me to build. That's not me.
Yep.
It's an
all the pages got mixed in there. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I just don't want anybody looking at this going, "Why'd you draw it that way?" But the real inspiration with this was to try to bring about a realization to the world that they were thinking of, and plus it was kind of an anything goes world, which is my favorite to create in. Transmetropolitan was that kind of a world where I was able to make the world visually, so there was no wrong. Yeah. And in this case, like, I brought a lot more aliens into it and wanted it to be more of like a Looney Tune, and because I saw like what they were doing, like the action. I didn't want the action to really hurt. I wanted it to be almost more slapstick with a lot of blood. And I think that's what I achieved, because that seems to be reflected in the reviews. But that's what made this thing fun, is that, like, they're very aware of that these characters, who they are. There's really not a good guy in the bunch. And Roy Sharpton is the worst. And yet he's sort of like enigmatic because he's so shameless and stupid. That you almost wait to see how he failed upwards and what's going to happen next.
Well, this may not make quite as much sense for people listening to the audio podcast. Obviously, we're also simulcasting this on Crowdcast and YouTube, but just because we have this up right now, talking about this character from Space Bastards up here, what goes into designing that? I mean, where do you start? Is that a specific description in the script? Is it improvising, playing around?
He was an alien. The only description they had is that he was supposed to have a mouth that looked like an anus. And so the very first drawing I did, he does. But as I got to draw him more, I never imagined I'd have to put him in a tux until they asked for that cover. But he's my favorite character, by the way. His name is Zordak. Because he's such a dichotomy. He's going to get his big debut in the next issue. But in this case, I was just trying to bring something to him where I could understand the personality. I wanted to bring some personality out in him, because had I kept him the way he was originally conceived, I don't think he would have emoted as much. And I think in this character's case, it's fun when he does, because he goes from being super sweet to one of the most badass characters in the bunch. Like, he's almost unstoppable. Kind of like what I love about Wolverine, Like, Wolverine's all nice to Logan and Kitty Pryde, and then he, pops his claws and takes on the Hulk. So Zordak was a lot of fun. And so my thinking on that, if you look real close when you're reading the book, you'll notice that his nostrils are actually another set of eyes.
Oh,
Wow.
That's really interesting.
That's hilarious.
One other thing while we're still looking at this picture, I mean, this isn't necessarily unique, but it is something that I really identify with your style. There's little hash marks that he has on his chin. I feel like you use that a lot artistically to shade things in. How did that develop? How did that become something that you rely on as a technique?
Oh, that's just called feathering.
Right.
It's just supposed to convey shape and form.
Okay. All right.
That's
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I just feel like I look at your stuff and I feel like I see that it's very prominent in your work in a nice way that makes me think, oh, okay, that's Darick Robertson drew this. But
well, I honestly, I've just been studying my heroes all these years, and that's like the way it looks right to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how Brian Bolland does it much better than I do. But I kind of look at his work. I look at Dave Stevens' inking. I like a lot of those 2000 AD classic artist style, and that to me just makes sense. It's just feathering. That's all I'm seeing.
Gotcha.
When you come to something,
it's hard for me to see my own style. People say that, but I don't see it because I'm sort of got a blind spot because all I see is what I would go back and fix.
You get to draw in the projects you choose. You get to draw so much violence, but also so many comedic moments. How do you approach those different pages, or is there one that you prefer? Just a truly horrifying thing, or just like an absolute punchline of a moment?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, for me, my job is a storyteller. My job is to make sure whatever the writer is trying to convey, if it's horror, I try to make it horrific. If it's funny, I try to make it funny. If it's, for me, that's my job. I'm the whole one-man show visually. So I'm designing the sets, I'm designing the costumes, I'm the actors, I'm the lighting, I'm everything. So if it's a noir story or it's supposed to be intense, I'll go in and I'll go back and look at Eisner and get some ideas for how to do good noir lighting. Or if it's supposed to be funny, I try to make it funny, and then that's why, Chuck Jones' Looney Tunes was a big inspiration for how I approach Space Bastards, because he would make violence funny.
Yeah.
So it's about just bringing in and honing down on what the point of the story is.
Yeah.
I don't try to have a one-size-fits-all approach to any one thing.
You have a bunch of other projects that are going right now, including, this was just announced, I believe, either yesterday or maybe late last week, but Batman Legends of the Dark Knight is something you're working on. You seem really pretty excited about that.
Your hat landed back on top of your hair.
What's that?
That's how excited. Your hat just popped off your head when we mentioned Batman and landed back on your head. So Dean's excited. Yeah.
What can we expect from that, and what in particular is so exciting about that for you, other than the fact, of course, that it's Batman?
Well, I'm writing it, and I'm not known for my writing, but I started out in my career as a writer and an artist doing a book called Space Beaver, and I always enjoy writing, but it almost feels like a waste of time when I can be working with the likes of the people I've collaborated with over the years and other writers that I still want to work with. That writing my own stuff almost feels self-indulgence. And it's almost more fun to collaborate sometimes, because a lot of times, even on the stuff I co-create, I get in, I talk to the writer and bring my own ideas to it. But this is a really rare case where years ago they were doing the Legends of the Dark Knight. Right before the big move from DC going to Burbank, they had hired me to do this story. And so I wrote this back in 2013, but it was based on an idea that I pitched that I thought up when I was a teenager. It was a Batman idea that I had when I was a teenager, and I was doing my sample pages to try to break in. And back in the day, you would, do a short story, 4 pages or so, and bring that to an editor and go, what do you think? And try to get a job. So this idea, I had the nugget of this idea for years. I've carried it with me since the 80s. And so when they asked me if I wanted to do one of these, I was like, yeah, I'd love to. And so I pitched it, and it was originally a 30-page story. The then editor, Hank Canals, came back and said, we love the idea. Can you put more villains in it? That's kind of like, we're having a pizza party. Would you like an extra large pizza? Oh, yeah. More? Thank you. So I went back and restructured it, and then they allowed me another 30 pages. So it's a 60-page story. It has a whole bunch of Batman's classic villains in it, and they're all tied together with the new character. I'm creating 2 new characters for this for the Batman universe in this story. One of them is the lead character you meet in chapter 1. They're 10-page chapters, and his name's Gas Mask, and he's this Russian black market guy that I'd read an article years ago about how some of the places that they're holding these old Russian leftover Cold War weapons bunkers that are unprotected and they're easily broken into. And so there were guys like getting a hold of these weapons and selling them on the black market. And so I heard a thing about around this time too, there was a sarin gas attack in Tokyo on the subway.
Yeah.
And my head started spinning on like, oh, what if this guy like that brought this to Gotham? And then it occurred to me, like, all of Batman's villains use gas in a certain way. Like all of them have some weird use of gas. Like, Riddler will put it in a package that'll explode and you'll get gassed, and Penguin has it in his umbrella and puts you to sleep, and Joker has it, when it's.
That's so funny. That's such a great observation. You think they would compare notes? Like, well, how do you keep your gas?
And Scarecrow, right? And Scarecrow's got his paranoia gas. So in my story, they're all competing to be the first one to get their hands on this weapons grade gas that's up and above anything they've ever had to work with before. And what he's selling is very versatile, so they can, dilute it or make it, in its most lethal form. It'll put you out. And I did some research on sarin gas and things like that too. So there's some science in it, but hey, it's Batman. But it's a lot of fun. I'm proud of the story. I'm not reinventing the wheel by any means, but it's also Batman's been awake for over 36 hours at the beginning of the story and needs to go home and sleep. But when he gets when he becomes aware that this gas is on the market and any of these maniacs can get their hands on it, he knows that he can't stop until he's stopped this sale from happening. So it's him on kind of like a quest to kind of stay alert and stay awake and keep himself going despite physical exhaustion and mental exhaustion at the beginning of the story. And then he just goes through hell. And then the name of the story is Good Night, as in KNHIGT, Bad Night, NIGHT. So it's Good Night, Bad Night, because it's like one of the crappiest nights of Batman's time. And it's sort of nice with the Legends of the Dark Knight. You can set it anywhere in his history, so it's not really relying on continuity. And again, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything. I'm just telling the Batman story with a lot of passion because I love those characters.
What has it been like for Darick the artist to work with Darick the writer?
I don't like Darick the writer very much.
Yeah,
because I'll start drawing the stuff that I write when I'm, and it's like the classic problem. Like you're writing, it's like you got all the ideas in the world, and then you sit down and draw them. But what was I thinking?
It's too much gas. There's all this gas.
Who's this writer? Why does he want me? Doesn't he have any idea how much time this is going to take? But yeah, at the same time, the good part of that is, I can change it. It's like, being the writer, call me up.
Know each other.
Do you mind if I do this? No, I don't mind. So,
good relationship.
You're also doing a Justice League story, I believe.
Yeah, I'm doing covers for Chip Zdarsky's writing a it's called JLA Last Ride, and that's been a lot of fun just because I get to draw. I'm drawing the Justice League on a series of 7 covers, and I'm working on the 3rd one now. And I'm just loving that too. It's also for their digital first series.
We just had Chip on. He was telling us about the story of that. Sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I'm like, and the covers are a lot of fun because I'm just drawing the classic guys, and they're in turmoil through all of it. So
awesome,
cool.
Now I know we can't ask you much, if anything, about The Boys season 3, but I did want to comment. What has this experience been like for you, seeing not just it become a TV show, but huge?
That's why I'm a fan. I mean, it's like more than anything. This could have been terrible, and I've been through experiences where, they make a TV show your thing and you're not a part of it at all. This has been the opposite, where it's like, this has been fantastic in that I've gotten to know a lot of the people. I've met the cast. I'm friends with Jack Quaid now. And, it's just been, and I feel like a part of things. They've hired me to do artwork for all 3 seasons. In season 2, You might remember there was a whole sequence with storyboards and that was
the
me.
movie.
They hired me to do it.
Awesome. We spotted that right away.
I was bummed because I did like 25 of them, and then you see like 7, and they're not even the ones I liked. But
that was such a funny.
The one where they're all fighting. But
that's such a funny bit. The pitch in the movie.
Yeah, I love it. And, but they've done an amazing thing with the show. What's incredible is that it's actually connected with the audience, because I didn't really, right before it was announced, they canceled The Tick. And on Amazon, and I was like, geez, is that where this is going?
You're like, we're fucked.
And, well, I didn't know. I mean, we got canceled at TC when it was a hit. So, that's just such a weird. But the timing couldn't have been better. They optioned this as a movie back in 2008. And so we waited all this time for it to actually get made. And now being made as a TV series has been kind of a godsend, because they can really explore. And the cast is just incredible. I'm so, not only are they lovely people to talk to in person, but they are so good. Anthony Starr has brought the character of Homelander up so many levels that when I was just doing the comic, like nobody ever asked for a Homelander sketch. Now that's like, he's like the #1 request I get. Wow. Everybody wanted Butcher.
It's such a good group of actors, and the way the show just it hit so hard in season 2 and season 3, the fact that it's being made now, like right when we want it to happen. it's very exciting.
Yeah, topically, I can't believe how on the pulse they've been. That was remarkable. That's almost just good luck. That or they're just that good. They are that good when it comes to writing, but I'm just amazed how prescient the show has been.
Yeah.
Very smart.
You mentioned having your art in the show, but there's also been a lot of your stuff that's been reproduced visually on screen through sequences and other eyes. Yeah. Was there anything in particular that you were very excited to see come to life?
Yeah, there was a moment when they had Terror on for one episode, and the reason being is Eric Kripke has been very clear that dogs will eat up a whole lot of shooting time because they don't always want to cooperate. So he can't have Terror there all the time, which would be wonderful. But they worked him into the show because they're always steering back to the comic whenever they can. They have the difference between what they do on screen and what they can do in a comic. It's limited, like they're two different formats, and there's a whole lot of considerations that go into making something on film that you don't even consider when you're drawing a comic book. So when they finally brought Terror on for a whole episode, I had read the episode, but there was a scene where Butcher and Terror just go for a walk.
Yeah.
And they're walking away from the camera, and they tilted the camera a little to the left, and it was like it came right out of my brain. And
that's awesome.
I got choked up.
That's so cool.
That was like, because I didn't see Carl's beard, I just saw Butcher from behind, and there's Terror trotting alongside of him, and it just felt like that was a moment come true that I got emotional over. It was it's been in the middle of COVID. So, it was when it came out, we were supposed to do a big thing down in San Diego this last year. And, that didn't happen, obviously. So it was just sort of all the stuff that I wasn't able to go out and celebrate with people, just sort of kind of welled up in me. But then it was at the same time, just such a striking moment. And I saw it throughout season 1 too, where even though they changed it to the Deep, exposing himself to Starlight in the first episode, they mirrored the angle I used in the comic.
Yeah.
And then when I was on set, I was there for when the first time I went to set, they were there doing the scene with Haley Joel Osment where they Butcher smashes him into the sink. And the director was setting up a shot, and I was kind of standing off to the side, just kind of fascinated seeing it all come together. And I literally heard him say, I want to bring the camera down here so it's more like one of Darick's panels.
And then you were like, I'm Darick.
And then when he was done and he was getting ready to go back to the chair, I go, did I hear you correctly? He said, oh, yeah, man, we're trying to make this look like your stuff. And I was like,
that's so cool.
So overwhelming. I had that chair there with my name on it, and it was really cool.
Man.
On the Terror tip.
That's the way they've been about the whole comic. Like Eric Kripke sat down with me at the beginning before he even wrote it. He had met with Garth, and then he sat down with me and asked us what we wanted the show to be like. And the fact that he even was asking me was like a big deal. because a lot of times people just get the rights and they go do whatever they want with it, and they could care less what I think. But
he's a smart,
he really
smart creator.
He really wanted Garth and I to like it, and I just told him it needs to be funny as well as hard hitting, because if it's just dark, like people are gonna start telling it's gonna be a long hard slog. And then I asked him to, was he gonna put the scene with Huey holding the hands in it, and he's like, I wasn't sure, and I told him why I thought it needed to be in there, and lo and behold, he made sure it was in there.
That's awesome.
Huge.
And then Dan Trachtenberg did his own thing with it, directing it like in slow-mo, where I would have done it like bam,